I don't do the most, but I do a lot. I'ma make a toast, cause we still alive.
You're going to be in Daniel 3 tonight, chapter 1. Because do you remember me speaking on this once before?
Yes.
Okay. This grass won't smoke was the name of the message. Yeah. This one's I smell something. The grass won't smoke was the one I did before on the same verses. And I tell you what, I had this all laid out probably Monday, and so I had everything perfect. And about 4 o'clock today, God said you're missing the big point that needs to be in here. So there's 2 extra slides on here that God added today because He's like, you need to get it together. You're totally missing the picture of what I want brought out of this message. And so I'm like, okay, so there's 2 more slides in here that I didn't have originally planned. But anyway, Daniel 3 is where we're at. And how many of you have ever found yourself stuck in a situation that you did not create? You didn't ask to be in it. You didn't walk into it. You didn't want to be there, but you were just there, whether you liked it or not. You were minding your own business, and for somehow you got caught up in this situation, whether it be good or bad. Most of you right now just automatically went to bad things that you got caught up in the middle of, that you had no control, no power, no nothing. And so when you get caught up in these situations that you have no control over, nothing you can do about it because you're not really in charge of the situation, you're stuck there whether you like it or not, and you feel like you have to pick a side. How many of you have to make that tough decision to pick a side? How hard is it to make that decision to pick a side? Very hard, because what's involved with picking a side? You don't want to be on the losing side of that picking a side. Because you feel like you pick, hopefully, what drives you to even pick that side you picked? If you get caught up in a situation with friends and you pick a side, why do you pick that side? When you pick your sides, you're picking your side a lot of times out of loyalty to somebody. Even if they're going to be, you know they're going to lose the situation, do you still hold on to your loyal friends? Yeah, a lot of times we do. We pick, even if we're going to end up losing, I'm still going to ride it out with this person. A lot of you want to be winners. A lot of you don't want to be looked at as, how many of you tried to play both sides? That's tough. That's super tough. How many of you try to be that neutral friend in the whole deal? You try to be the peacemaker. You should really take the Enneagram test and see where you're at. Okay, I'm not the peacemaker. But you see 3 guys in these verses get stuck in a situation they didn't create. Okay, they got stuck and they had to make a decision, and they got to pick. Every day you get up and walk out of your house. Every day you get out of bed, even sometimes at home, you got to pick a side. You feel like you're being pulled in different directions. And so even when you get to school, how many more directions are you being pulled? A lot. And you can be pulled in a different direction every class, then every group of people you are in, every situation. And these 3 guys, good godly men, get hung up in a situation. They're not under the rule they would love to be under. They're on Babylonian rule, but Babylonians have allowed some of the Jews to have some rule and dominion over certain areas of their kingdom, but only if they do what they say. And these guys had found favor in the Babylonian king, so they were in charge of a province. Okay, they were highly thought of, so these dudes were pretty good. So how many of you think of yourself as being a highly thought of person in you're not a bum. Okay, you're not just. Everybody in this room, if you really search the people around you, there's somebody that's looking up to you. Somebody is. It could be maybe 3 grades down. It could even be an upperclassman who is looking up to you, but they will never tell you because they're upperclassmen, right? Because no senior is going to tell a freshman, man, I think you're awesome. You're just so great. They might tell you that in a close-quartered car ride somewhere, but it's not going to be in front of their friends, because then they're going to lose cool points. Okay. So anyway, in Daniel 3, these guys have to pick a side. Okay. And so we're going to read 1 through 12. It says, King Nebuchadnezzar made a gold statue 90 feet tall and 9 feet wide, and set it upon the plain in Dura in the province of Babylon. Then he sent messengers to the high officers, officials, governors, advisors, treasurers, judges, magistrates, and all the provincial officials to come to the dedication of the statue he had set up. So all these officials came and stood before the statue King Nebuchadnezzar had set up. Then a herald shout out, "People of all races and nations and language listens to the king's command. When you hear the sound of the horn, the flute, the zither, the lyre, the harp, the pipes, and the other musical instruments, bow to the ground and worship King Nebuchadnezzar's gold statue. Anyone who refuses to obey will immediately be thrown into a blazing furnace." So at the sound of the musical instruments, all the people, whatever their race or nation or language, bowed to the ground and worshiped the gold statue that King Nebuchadnezzar had set up. But some of the astrologers went to the king and informed on the Jews. They said to the king Nebuchadnezzar, "Long live the king. You issued a decree requiring all people to bow down and worship the gold statue when they hear the sound of the horn, flute, zither, lyre, harp, pipes, and other musical instruments. That decree also states that those who refuse to obey must be thrown into the blazing furnace. But there are some Jews, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, who you have put in charge of the province of Babylon. They pay no attention to you, your majesty. They have refused to serve your gods, little g, and do not worship the gold statue you have set up." So what are they caught in the middle of? How do you feel like these guys are caught up in what they're in? What were these guys doing? Taking care of some property that had been given to them. They were away from this area, doing their thing, doing it right, and then all of a sudden some stupid, off-the-wall statue gets built that they start to worship, and now you got to change how your life is going because somebody else has changed something in your life. How many of you can relate to that? How many of you have life? How many of you feel like your life changes a lot? Just at home, at school, if you have a job, with your friends, whatever it is, you feel like your life gets changed radical. Because this was a radical change for them. They were minding their own business. They were free to worship their God. They were doing what they were supposed to be doing to stay in favor of the king. And then all of a sudden, somebody builds a statue. The king builds this ginormous, 90 feet tall, 9 foot wide. How big is that? That's like, so now they're being told they have to do this or do that. How many of you feel like you've been put in some extreme situations where you have to make an extreme decision this way or extreme decision this way? Now we can give you the Sunday school answer and be like, oh man, I just follow God and everything He told me to do. But whenever you're being threatened to the extreme, where does your attitude go? Where does your mind start to go? Survival. Survival in your reputation. Survival in your circle of friends. Survival in your class, your school, your sports program you're in. You start to think, oh my gosh, if I turn my back on God, what am I going to lose? How many of you are fighting so hard right now to get some friends to a more godly relationship? Not that you're perfect. Not that you got everything nailed down and that you just know everything there is about being a perfect Christian. Because that's one of the things that we can do a lot of times. We're trying to talk to others about Christ, or we're trying to lead friends. We can actually put ourselves up on a pedestal that we don't really belong on. When really you're on the same level they are. You're just trying to figure this all out. Figure out what God has. And you're really just trying to go with them, not above them. And you wish they'd just go with you. But instead, they're making you choose extreme. Am I extremely away from what God wants me to do, or am I extremely with God? And it's tough to make those decisions. What's the hardest part about making those decisions? I know there's people in this room that are fighting for their friends' lives. Does that make sense? They're lost, and you're fighting for their life. You are trying to talk to them, you're trying to go this direction with them, but their lifestyle is pulling you a different way. Their beliefs, their ideas are pulling you a different way. And you know it's wrong, but these guys had a decision to make. They either bow down to this statue or they follow the God who they have believed in and put their trust in their whole life so far. It's not your fault that they're not where they're supposed to be. It's not your fault that they're not coming to church. It's not your fault that they're not accepting Christ like you've been trying to talk to them about. And we try to force it a lot. And what happens when you force it on your friends? They get pushed away. You get closer to the fire, actually. Or you push them closer to the fire, I should say. You could take these verses. Whenever I preached on this before, I knew this was going to be a little bit different direction. What it is, you could preach this in so many ways it ain't even funny. That's why I love God's Word. It can just go whatever direction it needs to go to fit. But these guys got stuck in this spot, and things. It's not that this section is titled "Things Could Get Hot." These things are going to get hot. Okay, when you're trying to deal, or when you're in these situations, how many of you feel like you can feel the heat coming off of what you're trying to do? The heat being attitudes. The heat being the hurt from them not following what you have the idea, or the heat that you're getting from God because God's going, what are you doing? Have you even ever had God just talk to you and go, I'm not this big audible voice, but you're starting to go the direction with them and God's going, what are you doing? What are you doing? I'm over here, I'm not sweating, but you are. You're fixing to get real hot. What are you doing? You found yourself getting in those spots? I have. I did it. That's what caused me to get away from God in my late teens, is because I started running around with people that I was trying to get into church, and then it started to influence me too much, and I started to go with them instead of being dedicated to God and following what He wanted me to do. And that left me down a lot of roads of being hot instead of being, I was hot for that reputation. I was trying to follow this image that I thought I should have instead of being where I should have been for God. How much better would it probably have been for me if I'd have stayed faithful for God? You know, it's kind of like I watched a husband and a wife arguing one day, and the husband, who was like 6'7", and this 4'8" wife, and I mean, he is screaming at her. I mean, just bellowing out. He hadn't touched her. He hadn't said nothing. His wife kept the same tone. Never raised her voice, not one time. And she just stood there and talked to him with the same voice. Do you know what started to happen? His voice started getting lower and lower and lower. Finally, she stayed steady and brought him down to where he needed to be. I didn't stay steady. I read that picture that they needed to bring them down to where they needed to be. They thought they were flying so high. I thought I was flying so high with them. But I was out of the will of God, and I was doing my own thing. And God's sitting over there going, what are you doing? You ever had God just tell you, what are you doing? What are you doing, stupid? I mean, that's what He told me, stupid. Has anybody else had God tell you you're stupid? If you haven't, it's going to. If He hasn't told you you're stupid, He has. Trust me. He has told you you're stupid. He will get there. So things start to get hot for these guys. Okay, we're going to be in 13 through 18. Then Nebuchadnezzar flew into a rage and ordered that Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego be brought before him. When they were brought in, Nebuchadnezzar said to them, is it true, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, one of these days I'll tell you their real Jewish name, that you refuse to serve my gods or worship the gold statue I have set up? I will give you one more chance to bow down and worship the statue I have made when you hear the sound of the musical instruments. But if you refuse, you will be thrown immediately into the blazing furnace, and then what God will be able to rescue from my power? Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego replied, O Nebuchadnezzar, we do not need to defend ourselves before you. If we are thrown into the blazing furnace, the God whom we serve will be able to save us. He will rescue us from your power, your majesty. But even if He doesn't, we want to make it clear to you, your majesty, that we will never serve your gods or worship the gold statue you have set up. And it was crazy for me this morning. The same people that I ran around with that brought me out of God, I walked into Casey's this morning in Cassville, with these people on my mind whenever I started putting this message together were standing in Casey's when I walked in the door. We're civil to each other, we talk to each other, but they know that we're distant. And I talked to them. They hadn't seen me since my mom had passed away. And so they wanted to tell me that they were sorry for this happening. I said, and so I just started laying it out. It sucks. It was not, I said, I really could have done without this year for everything that's happened to us in our family. But I know she's in heaven. So it gave me an opportunity to get that plug in to them. It gave me an opportunity to open that up to him. And I thought it was so crazy that this is what I'm speaking on tonight. And I run into the very same people that actually led me towards that 90-foot God instead of the God I was supposed to be with. How many of you have people in your life right now that look like a 90-foot God? Just because of the pull they have in your life. We often say, well, those are our Goliaths. You know, there's a little Goliath head over there on the wall that the little kids used some time back for children's church, I believe, or something in here. I don't know what it was for, but anyway, it's still up there on the wall. But for me, I have some friends, I have some acquaintances that are more like these big, giant, 90-foot wide gods than Goliath ever thought of being. But these guys, how many of you would love to have the attitude these guys have when it comes to fighting what is put in their way? I mean, really, we don't have to face the persecution like they have to face for their faith, but you have it on a certain level. Would you agree with that? Because some of you, I know, have some close friends right now that are living the most ungodly life, and you feel like you're running around this God, and it just keeps turning with you, and you can't seem to get around it. Stay persistent with it. One day God will put his hand on that. And he will be persistent. If you stay with that voice level, not screaming like the 6-foot tall guy, but keep steady like the 4-foot lady, you'll see a big change in their life. Because these guys were already starting to witness to King Nebuchadnezzar about God. Would you agree? Because they just said, we're not going to bow down to your God. You could throw us into that fire, and our God may not save us from your fire. Am I making any sense right now? Some of you look sleepy. I know you're tired. It's been a long day, right? School is that 90-foot God that you're trying to run around. The test tomorrow is a 90-foot God you're trying to run around. You're trying to get straight. But who do they see? This is not the last two slides, but after these verses, this is where God's like, okay, you're missing the picture on this. Okay, it's good what you got so far, but you're missing the picture on this. Okay, these guys, and we know what happens to them because we read it in 3:19 through 27. It says, Nebuchadnezzar was so furious with Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego that his face became distorted with rage. He commanded that the furnace be heated 7 times hotter than usual. Then he ordered some of the strongest men of his army to bind Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego and throw them into the blazing furnace. So they tied them up and threw them into the furnace, fully dressed in their pants, turbans, robes, and other garments. And because the king in his anger had demanded such a hot fire in the furnace, the flames killed the soldiers as they threw the 3 men in. So Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, securely tied, fell into the roaring fires. But suddenly Nebuchadnezzar jumped up in amazement and exclaimed to his advisors, "Didn't we tie up 3 men and throw them into the furnace?" "Yes, your majesty, we certainly did," they replied. "Look," Nebuchadnezzar shouted, "I see 4 men unbound walking around in the fire unharmed, and the 4th looks like a god." He should have threw a big G on that. Then Nebuchadnezzar came as close as he could to the door of the flaming furnace and shouted, "Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, servants of the Most High God," there he throws his big G, "come out, come here." So Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego stepped out of the fire. Then the high officers, officials, governors, and advisors crowded around them and saw that the fire had not touched them. Not a hair on their heads was singed, and their clothes was not scorched. They didn't even smell of smoke. Then Nebuchadnezzar said, praise to the God of Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. He sent his angel to rescue his servants who trusted in him. I said I wasn't going to go any farther than that. But some of us still smell. Some of you have been thrown in the fire and you still smell. You're still carrying around the smoke of what happened to you. You're still carrying around the smell of the situation that you got put in, that you didn't ask to be a part of it, but you're allowing it to have too much control over your life. You're allowing it to have too much control over your mind, your heart, and your actions, everything you do. And my big deal for you guys tonight, I think Google gives a 5-step deal on how to get smoke out of your house if you have a fire in there. How many of you were here last week when Laura Jean burnt the bag of popcorn in the microwave back there?
I was supposed to.
Okay. How many of you have ever had a burnt bag of popcorn in your house? How long does that stench stay? Long time. I can almost still smell it in my nose talking about it. But this stuff still smells. This bad situation sticks to you. How many of you feel like the situations that you didn't ask to be put in are still sticking to you? You didn't ask to be there, but you're stuck in it. You didn't ask for mom and dad to get divorced, but you're still stuck in it. You didn't ask for the depression that you have, but you got it. You didn't ask for school to be this hard, but you still smell like it. If I kept going, I could hit you in whatever it is. You didn't ask for it, but you still stink. In 28 through 30, then Nebuchadnezzar said, "Praise to God, the God of Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. He sent his angel to rescue the servants who trusted him. They defied the king's command. We were willing to die rather than to serve or worship any god except their own God. Therefore I make this decree: if any people, whatever their race or nation or language, speak a word against the God of Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, they will be torn limb from limb, and their houses be turned into heaps of rubble, and there is no other God who can rescue like this." Then the king promoted Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego to an even higher position in the province of Babylon. And so I got through all of that, and I looked at every bit of that, and God's like, "You're missing something. You are missing." Let's go back to the furnace. Because some of you have made it through the fire. You've made it through mom and dad getting divorced. You've made it through your depression. You've made it through some bad situation at school or a circle of friends. But too often times we're like, God was so great because I made it here to the end. And you start glorifying God where he's at with you right now when you've made it. But if we miss what was happening in the furnace, you'll miss what you can hold on to when you're in it. Look, Nebuchadnezzar shouted, "I see 4 men abound walking around in the fire unharmed. The 4th looks like a god." And that's why I put that picture up there. Who's in the middle? Jesus. God could have looked at Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego and just caused them not to be burnt. He could have caused them to come out not smelling like smoke. But what makes me so excited about it is that God came in himself and got in the middle of my crap. He got in the middle of my bad situation and walked with me in it. He didn't just sit outside and coach me from the side. He got in the junk with me. Every bad situation that you've had, every bad situation you're gonna have, he's gonna be walking with you in it. If you have scars from cutting, thank God he was with you in that. He didn't stop you from doing it, but he kept you from going too far. And now he has a purpose for you. He's brought you out. But some of you are still holding on to the stink of that. You didn't ask to be in the situation of mom and dad screaming at each other till it goes to divorce. I didn't ask for my mom to die. But I can see how God was walking with me in it the whole time. God just wasn't sitting up in heaven waiting to receive my mother. He was in the hospital room. He was in the car on the ride home. He was everywhere I was at, in it with me, in the fire. Our choice is, do we let people see him walking with us in it? Or do we pretend like he's a coach over on the sideline yelling at me what to do in there, when in reality, he's one of the players? How would you love to have God to be your point guard basketball team? How would you love for God to be your hitter and your blocker on volleyball team? How would you like for God to be your band director in your choir? Well, it's just because there's nothing better. But you can read through this whole story and just fly right over that. And that's what I did. And today he's like, hey, you're talking about these guys, but you forgot me. I was in it with you. Just this picture. Where's he at? He's in the middle. He's in the middle of it. He's not off to the left or right. He could have saved us by just doing it from heaven, by just giving us another type of sacrifice to give up. But no, he come down to earth and he got in the middle of it. He got put in a situation he didn't ask to be put in. Jesus didn't ask to be rejected. He didn't ask to be ridiculed. He didn't ask to be whipped. He didn't ask to be killed. But he was willing to get into the middle of it, just like he did with Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. And if you read through this Bible, you'll see tons of stories of people that he came and got in the middle of it. He didn't just sit off to the side, he got in the middle of it. So right now, whatever you're smelling of, whatever has got a stench on you that you can't get rid of, he's in the middle of it. I don't ever want to forget this, because he's in the middle of it. If he had never got into the middle of it, I wouldn't have salvation. If he had never got into the middle of you through conviction, you wouldn't have him as your Savior. And you know what's really scary right now is that there's somebody in this room who's never put him in the middle. They're just treating him as he's off to the side. With their relationship with him, more importantly, their relationship with their friends, their family, their relationship with themselves. Don't try. He wants to get in with you if you'll let him in. If you're lost, he wants to get in with you. Man, I heard the craziest story this week from the pastor who's preaching up there at Newside at the revival. He said he was given an invitation one night at a church 10 years after his marriage, and he's standing there and he's gave this call for people to come forward that needed to receive Christ. And it was about people who had put on this phony facade that they'd been saved in Bible school or church camp or whatever, and it wasn't real. They just did it because everybody else did it, or they thought it's what they were supposed to do. They thought they had to do it because they were at church or whatever. And he's standing there, and he says, my wife comes up to the front and she says, Rick, he says, not right now, honey. I got people that are getting ready to come forward. It's a preacher's wife. 10 years. Preacher's wife. Preacher's daughter. And she walks up to him and says, I know, I'm one of them. I'm lost. She finally let God get in the middle of everything in her life. If that's you tonight, I want to give you that opportunity. I want you to bow your heads right now with me. We're going to pray. If you've got something right now that you are in the middle of, and you want God to get in it with you, I just want you to raise your hand. I just want to pray for you. Nobody's looking around. Nobody's eyes are open. If you're in the middle of some friends, if you're in the middle of some homes, I want you to raise your hand, and you can put it right back down. If you're one of those people right now that God is trying to get in the middle of you to be your Lord and Savior, that this picture of this cross is reality, come reality tonight, I want to give you the opportunity to raise your hand. because I would love to pray with you. Coach would love to pray with you. My wife would love to pray with you. I could point you to any person in this room to pray with you. I just don't want you to walk out of here without Christ being the middle of your life. If not, I'm going to close this out in prayer real quick. You take time to pray where you're at, whatever you want to. I want you to take the time tonight to get your situation connected with God, to get God in the middle of it. Don't keep him outside the fire. He didn't want to stay out there. He wants to be in it with you. He's proven that through these messages. Through the cross alone, he wants to be in the middle.